s'intitule Réseaux sociaux, controverses, commémorations Canada par Analays, Alvares et Hernandex de l'Université d'Ottawa. Je vais juste introduire avec sa bio. Donc, Analays Alvares Hernandex est historienne de l'art et commissaire d'exposition indépendante. Elle est détentrice d'un baccalauréat en histoire de l'art de l'Université de La Habana, ainsi que d'une maîtrise en études des arts et d'un doctorat en histoire de l'art de l'Université du Québec à Montréal. Grâce à une formation plurilingue et à une expérience de travail acquise notamment dans les milieux muséaux et académiques, dans des contextes culturels et sociopolitiques variés, donc Cuba, le Canada et la France, elle a développé une expérience dans les champs suivants: art public, patrimoine de l'immigration, société postcoloniale. De 2016 à 2018, elle était stagiaire postdoctorale à l'Université de Toronto, où elle a enseigné l'art public et développé le projet de recherche Ethno-Cultural Monuments in Canada. Présentement, elle est professeure à temps partiel à l'Université d'Ottawa et membre de la Commission permanente de l'art public de Culture Montréal. Qu'est-ce que je fais avec ça? C'est quoi ça? Est-ce que c'est une erreur? Ah, vous ne voyez pas. C'est bon. Juste derrière. C'est bon. Voilà. OK.
Vous m'entendez bien? Oui. On m'a demandé de parler très lentement, donc je vais faire de mon mieux. Merci Fanny de cette présentation. J'ai changé un peu les titres de ma présentation, mais très légèrement. Donc, je l'ai intitulé « Vie et mort du monument à l'ère des médias socio-numériques », hashtag controverse, hashtag commémoration, hashtag Canada. Je tenais à entamer ma communication en montrant des images de l'œuvre « Nouveau drapeau pour vieux monuments ». L'artiste Noémie Maccombert a commencé cette série d'interventions performatives en 2011 afin de remettre en question, à la lumière des réalités géopolitiques et sociales contemporaines, la présence dans l'arrondissement Ville-Marie à Montréal de quelques monuments, dont ceux aux effigies de Jean Vauquelin, de Jean-Olivier Chénier, de John Young et de la reine Victoria. Maccombert souhaitait les contextualiser en les parant des symboles incarnant des réalités et des représentations plus proches des communautés locales actuelles. Sur les fleurs d'Élysée, vous pouvez le voir à l'écran, les références à la monarchie française et à la religion catholique ont été remplacées par des harfans de neige, des talons aux roses, des cornets de crème glacée, des boutines et des cœurs en arc-en-ciel. Pour tenter de comprendre l'ampleur ainsi que l'accélération de la cadence prise en sol canadien, par ce qu'on peut appeler des gestes de commémoration corrigés, que ces gestes prennent la forme de pratiques artistiques éphémères ou d'épisodes de vandalisme sur des monuments historiques, ou encore des pétitions pour retirer ces derniers, je propose d'examiner l'impact et les répercussions au Canada de la couverture médiatique, principalement via les médias socio-numériques, des incidents survenus en 2017 à Charlottesville, aux États-Unis, en lien avec les projets de déboulonnement de l'Statut du général confédéré Robert E. Lee, ainsi que du mouvement étudiant Rhodes Must Fall en 2015 en Afrique du Sud. De manière plus large, je vais tenter de comprendre les rôles joués par des plateformes comme Facebook, Twitter ou YouTube sur le façonnement de la mémoire collective et par conséquent dans la consolidation des actions populaires et institutionnelles à l'œuvre en sol canadien visant à corriger, redresser ou voire décommémorer des représentations du passé qui contraviennent à nos valeurs contemporaines. Quel rôle ces plateformes jouent-elles dans la discussion publique sur la commémoration du passé? Pour tenter d'y répondre, je vais examiner, à la lumière d'une ère contemporaine marquée par un état permanent d'hyperconnectivité, les concepts de traveling memory, développés par la chercheuse allemande Astrid Earl. Cette analyse servira à comprendre la formation et la consolidation des nouvelles communautés de mémoire Donc, je vais aussi vérifier la portée et la présence au Canada à travers l'examen des débats entourant le statut d'Edward Cornwallis à Halifax et de la reine Victoria et de John A. Macdonald à Montréal. Il sera question de déterminer si la remise en question du paysage commémoratif canadien est due, premièrement, c'est ma première hypothèse, à la diffusion et au partage massif d'informations, de photos et de vidéos sur les incidents associés aux monuments confédérés au lendemain des incidents de Charlottesville et au mouvement Road Must Fall. Ou si cette remise en question, je vais essayer de vérifier si c'est plutôt conséquence de la mise en œuvre des politiques du repentir qui reconnaissent des instances spécifiques de violence et de destruction au Canada en lien avec son passé colonial. Et troisièmement, je me demande si c'est plutôt, s'il s'agit de cette remise en question est due au partage transnational et transculturel d'un lourd héritage colonial et d'un souhait aussi partagé et toujours en devenir de décoloniser nos sociétés ainsi que nos représentations du passé. Le retrait de la statue de Cecil John Rhodes de l'entrée de l'Université du Cap le 9 avril 2015 a été relayé par les caméras de télévision de ces pays ainsi que sur les différentes plateformes socio-numériques. Je vais vous faire jouer une petite vidéo amateur, justement, qui a couvert cette cérémonie, où vous allez voir des actes de flagellation symbolique à l'endroit des statues également. Si ça marche. Je suis dans le Facebook d'Alexandrine, je pense. Comment je peux... OK, désolée Alexandrine. Je vais... voilà. Je ne sais pas quoi faire ici. Quelqu'un... OK, c'est bon. Donc, on fait comme ça. Et on revient au début et on met le son. Bon, il n'y a pas de son.
Est-ce que le son est pour brancher?
OK, c'est pas grave. Je vais juste vous laisser. C'est une vidéo qui dure 30 secondes. Et voilà, la fin de la vidéo. Je vais essayer de sortir d'ici. Et voilà, et revenir à ma présentation. Donc, Rhodes, la statue de Rhodes, et justement, elle était devant la statue, devant l'Université du Cap, où elle rendait hommage aux magnats et politiciens britanniques qui avaient donné les terrains sur lesquels les principaux campus de cette université étaient construits. Précisément, ce legs foncier a été lourdement contesté lors des manifestations étudiantes qui se sont muées en Road Must Fall et aussi dans un communiqué, et je cite ce communiqué. Rhodes has been praised for donating this land to the university, building the South African economy and bringing civilization to this country. But how can a colonizer donate land that was never his land in the first place? Fin de citation. Ok, est-ce que je suis en contrôle ou pas? Donc, Rhodes Must Fall s'est étendu, ce mouvement s'est étendu à d'autres universités et aussi dépassé les milieux universitaires dans plusieurs villes sud-africaines comme à Port Elizabeth, où une sculpture de la reine Victoria a été essuyée de peinture verte. Je vais vous demander de garder cette image à l'esprit tout au long de ma présentation. L'ampleur de ces actes de vandalisme a été telle qu'au lendemain des actions et des échos de Rhodes Must Fall, le département sud-africain des arts et de la culture s'est repenché sur la décision de ne pas retirer les monuments associés à l'impérialisme britannique et au nationalisme afrikaner qui avaient été prises lors des audiences de la Commission de la vérité et de la réconciliation qui se sont tenues dans ces pays au milieu des années 1990. tels que Kim Miller et Brenda Madman l'affirment, et je cite tous les deux, Act of desecration suggests that for many who experience themselves as oppressed and denied opportunity, public art policy grounded in a principle of reconciliation was understood as simply perpetuating discrimination experienced in colonial and apartheid eras and as therefore being untenable. Fin de citation. En août 2017, du côté de Charlottesville, aux États-Unis, l'annonce du retrait d'une statue représentant le chef d'état-major de l'armée confédérée, Robert E. Lee, se solde par un bilan meurtrier. Une personne est tuée et 19 autres sont blessés lors d'un affrontement entre des partisans du maintien des statues, dont des membres du Ku Klux Klan et des néo-nazis, et des contre-manifestants, dont des représentants d'associations afro-américaines et des groupes issus de la galaxie antifasciste regroupés sous le label d'Antifa. Ces événements, comme vous le savez, vont déclencher une vague de retraits officiels et populaires des statuts d'hommes politiques et d'officiers confédérés à travers les États-Unis. Je voulais vous montrer une vidéo d'un de ces retraits populaires. J'espère que ça va marcher cette fois-ci. Non, ça ne marche pas. OK, donc ça ne prend pas en compte l'hyperlien. Donc, je disais que bon, ça c'est un soldat confédéré justement qui a été retiré par des manifestants. Et c'est un peu à l'image de ce qui s'est passé lors de la cérémonie de retrait de Cecil John Rhodes en Afrique du Sud. Il y a eu les manifestants qui ont infligé à les statues toutes sortes des châtiments et des punitions symboliques. Donc, je disais que ces événements vont déclencher toute une vague de retraits officiels à travers les États-Unis. Mais de retour à Charlottesville et en se référant aux incidents qui ont eu lieu dans cette ville en Virginie, les chercheurs français Roger Persichino invitent à se demander, et je les cite, pourquoi ces événements, les événements de Charlottesville, qui ne se singularisent ni par le nombre de manifestants, ni par leur violence, regrettable, mais loin de la violence tristement coutumière du pays sous bien des formes des États-Unis, ont déclenché une telle fureur. Il se demande pourquoi ces événements ont déclenché une telle fureur. Que s'est-il passé à Charlottesville à l'été 2017? La question mérite d'être posée, d'autant plus que depuis mars 2016, donc depuis une année, le conseil municipal de Charlottesville examinait déjà la possibilité de retirer la statue de Lee. Au même moment, toujours en mars 2016, une pétition populaire publiée sur le site change.org circulait pour exiger son déboulonnement. Au Canada, plusieurs monuments qui véhiculent des idéologies racistes, esclavagistes et génocidaires sont aussi sous la loupe des différents activistes et associations. Les débats publics sur le fait de renommer nos rues ou nos institutions ou de retirer des monuments anciens ainsi que les actes de vandalisme à leur endroit ne datent pas d'hier. Ces actes sont souvent des attaques à la peinture. Par exemple, à Montréal, les bustes de la reine espagnole Isabelle la Catholique et les statues de James McGill, de la reine Victoria et de Jonah McDonald en sont régulièrement la cible. Dans les cas des statues de McDonald, comme vous le savez bien, et ces attaques se vérifient à travers le Canada. Mais ce qui ressort de ces épisodes, mais aussi des pétitions de retrait en cours ou des retraits déjà constatés, comme c'est le cas de la statue de McDonald à Victoria, par exemple, c'est que la plupart de ces gestes sont en lien avec les ravages de l'impérialisme britannique et les traitements infligés aux populations autochtones. Au Canada, sur le plan institutionnel, un devoir de mémoire et un discours de réconciliation transparaissent notamment à travers un virage vers des politiques du repentir, particulièrement en relation avec son passé colonial. Ces politiques sont axées, et se sont aussi largement limitées, à l'expression d'un sentiment de regret concernant les rôles joués par les gouvernements dans le fonctionnement des pensionnats autochtones, véhiculés notamment par la Commission canadienne de vérité et réconciliation et par divers médias. Cette commission, qui a tenu ses travaux entre 2008 et 2015, semble avoir changé en fait les dialogues sur la commémoration au Canada. Elle s'est conclue avec l'adoption des 94 appels à l'action, dont plusieurs concernaient directement des activités de commémoration, que l'on évoque les appels 81 et 82, qui demandaient l'érection des monuments nationaux sur les pensionnats à Ottawa et dans toutes les capitales provinciales. Les nouveaux médias de communication, que l'on pense à la technologie mobile et aux médias socio-numériques, sont en train de modifier la manière dont on se remémore et c'est dont on se remémore. Pour explorer l'impact des plateformes comme Facebook, Twitter ou YouTube sur le façonnement de la mémoire collective, je veux me concentrer dans un premier temps sur la nature transculturelle de cette mémoire et sur sa capacité à voyager. Pour développer la notion de traveling memory, Astrid L. s'est inspiré des travaux de l'historienne de l'art Abby Barber sur les migrations de l'image à travers le temps et l'espace, ainsi que la notion de traveling cultures de l'historien et anthropologue James Clifford. Dans la compréhension d'Earl, les mouvements ou voyages sont des caractéristiques constitutives de la mémoire, car toute mémoire doit voyager, être maintenue en mouvement afin de rester en vie et pour avoir un impact à la fois sur les esprits individuels et sur les formations sociales. Tel que les travaux de Barber les mettent en évidence, ça on le sait, la mémoire a quand même voyagé depuis la nuit de temps et ses formes et contenus ont acquis de nouvelles significations et vies selon son contexte de réception. Comment, avec qui, par quels moyens la mémoire voyage-t-elle aujourd'hui? Elle identifie 5 porteurs de mémoire, dont les individus, les médias au sens large et les images et les récits qu'elle appelle contenu, content. La mémoire voyage ainsi avec les déplacements des individus et à travers les images fixes ou en mouvement, diffusées et partagées sur les médias traditionnels, mais principales et plus rapidement, je dirais pas plus rapidement, j'utiliserais plus immédiatement sur les médias socio-numériques. Qu'est-ce que les partages d'images et de vidéos sur ces médias fait à la mémoire collective? Comment ces partages sévit-ils dans le domaine de la commémoration publique? Par connective turn, les spécialistes des études de la mémoire numérique Andrew Hoskins fait référence à une ère contemporaine d'hyperconnectivité qui transforme, entre autres, la mémoire, ses modes de formation, de transmission, de circulation et de réception. Ce qui veut dire que la mémoire aujourd'hui est aussi produite, entretenue et sauvegardée dans les réseaux qui se tissent entre les personnes et les machines. Les médias socio-numériques, tels des agents de mémoire, produisent, réactivent, entretiennent et véhiculent différentes versions du passé et en viennent à déterminer, ça je l'ai déjà dit, la manière dont on se remémore et c'est dont on se remémore. Les nouvelles plateformes socio-numériques favorisent ainsi la création des communautés transculturelles et transnationales de mémoire, des nouvelles communautés d'une mémoire qui est elle aussi transculturelle et transnationale. Les préfixes trans impliquent une double acception, à travers puis au-delà des cultures et des nations. Par conséquent, ces nouvelles communautés, puisqu'intrinsèquement associées au connective turn, semblent remettre en question la compréhension traditionnelle de la mémoire collective, héritée notamment des travaux du sociologue français Maurice Alvares. Donc, depuis la formation de cette nation au XIXe siècle, cette mémoire a été construite à l'intérieur et par rapport à la nation, ce qui a conduit à fixer et à homogénéiser les groupes sociaux, leur identité et leur passé. Tel que Daniel Levy et Nathan Snyder l'expliquent, je les cite, "The conventional concept of collective memory is firmly embedded within the container of the nation state." Fin de citation. Et dans ces containers ou cadres nationaux, les monuments ont historiquement constitué des points focaux pour cette mémoire qui, dans sa définition traditionnelle, est non transculturelle. Notre culture numérique contemporaine favorise donc la formation des communautés de mémoire dont certaines sont devenues globales et cosmopolites, que l'on pense à la mémoire de l'Holocauste ou de l'apartheid, ou encore à celle de la colonisation. Cette dernière intrinsèquement transculturelle et transnationale, à l'image des différents processus de colonisation menés notamment, mais pas exclusivement, par les empires européens. Les États-Unis, le Canada et l'Afrique du Sud sont quelques-unes des nations partageant l'expérience de la colonisation par les empires européens. Pourtant, dans les processus de partage de cette mémoire collective, nous ne pouvons entièrement parler des mémoires prosthétiques. J'y réfléchis encore, si on peut ou on ne peut pas, mais Alison Landsberg a élaboré cette notion de mémoire prosthétique pour décrire la façon dans laquelle les nouvelles technologies et la culture des masses ont permis la transmission et le partage global de mémoire, notamment lorsque les liens intergénérationnels ont été brisés ou les liens familiaux ont été brisés. Donc, ce qui me pose problème avec cette notion, c'est que l'assimilation d'un récit historique sans lien direct ou même indirect avec les récepteurs ne semble pas être ce qui arrive dans les processus mémoriels concernant l'entreprise coloniale ou pas entièrement. Cette dernière, l'entreprise coloniale, malgré ses différences contextuelles, a laissé, entre autres, un héritage traumatique commun que l'on pense au génocide physique et culturel des populations autochtones à travers les Amériques, pour citer un exemple, ou à l'arrachement des populations au continent africain qui ont conduit à l'instauration de l'esclavage. Ce qui nous intéresse du cas théorique développé par Landsberg est cette idée que l'empathie constitue un critère important pour la réception de la mémoire d'autrui et la solidarité, un de ses effets possibles. Pour les sociétés aux prises avec les traumatismes de la colonisation, il ne s'agit pas d'adhérer ou de s'approprier une mémoire collective quelconque, car il s'agit d'une mémoire qui est la leur, indépendamment des particularités de chaque contexte culturel, social ou politique. Il s'agit d'une mémoire collective de l'entreprise coloniale que les médias socio-numériques façonnent, consolident et font voyager, et en se faisant, ils s'exacerbent des sentiments de solidarité à travers les cultures et les nations concernées par cette expérience. Et sur ceci, je me tourne vers l'analyse des événements entourant 3 monuments au Canada à la lumière des travaux de la Commission canadienne de vérité et réconciliation et de la couverture socio-numérique des gestes de commémoration corrigés posés aux États-Unis et en Afrique du Sud. Les manifestations et les affrontements au pied de la statue d'Edward Cornwallis, qui ont abouti à son éventuel retrait du centre-ville d'Halifax, et les attaques récurrentes à la peinture sur les statues de John Macdonald et de la reine Victoria à Montréal mettent en évidence la formation et l'élargissement des nouvelles communautés de mémoire autour d'un passé colonial. En janvier 2018, le Halifax Regional Council a voté en faveur du retrait d'une statue d'Edward Cornwallis du parc éponyme à Halifax. La décision a été prise après qu'un rapport de cette municipalité avait recommandé de la retirer au nom de la sûreté publique, puisque les affrontements au pied de la statue se succédaient à des intervalles réguliers depuis l'été 2017. Le 1er juillet 2017, soit 1 mois et demi avant les incidents de Charlottesville, 5 membres des Proud Boys, groupe de militaires d'extrême droite et se voulant les gardiens de l'héritage européen en Amérique du Nord, se sont invités en brandissant les drapeaux du Canada impérial à une cérémonie tenue par la communauté Mi'kmaq au pied de la statue de l'ancien gouverneur. À titre de rappel, Cornwallis est considéré comme le fondateur de Halifax. Il est aussi considéré comme l'un des responsables du génocide des Mi'kmaq. En octobre 1849, Cornwallis émet la proclamation de l'exculpation qui offrait une récompense à quiconque tue un adulte ou un enfant Mi'kmaq. Les premières remises en question de la statue de Cornwallis ont commencé il y a 25 ans. En 1993, l'aîné Mi'kmaq Daniel Paul publie « Nous n'étions pas les sauvages », ouvrage qui nous expose au point de vue des Mi'kmaq sur l'histoire de la Nouvelle-Écosse et qui souligne la violence avec laquelle Cornwallis a gouverné ces territoires Micmac afin de les transformer en espaces britanniques. En 2011, on avait notamment retiré à une école secondaire à Halifax les noms de ses gouverneurs. Quelques mois avant les incidents de Halifax, en avril 2017, c'est-à-dire avant l'affrontement entre les Proud Boys et les membres de la communauté Micmac, un comité d'experts qui incluait des représentants Micmac avait été mis sur pied par les conseils de la municipalité pour se pencher sur la commémoration des Cornwallis. Le 15 juillet 2017, 2 semaines après les affrontements à ses pieds, les statues avaient été notamment, et vous les voyez à l'écran, recouvertes d'un voile noir par les employés de la ville afin d'empêcher son retrait par les 150 manifestants environ qui avaient répondu à l'invitation, vous voyez ici l'invitation sur l'écran, lancée sur Facebook par l'activiste Micmac Suzanne Paddles. Elle avait lancé une invitation à retirer pacifiquement les statues des Cornwallis. Du côté de Montréal, et c'est au fil des ans, le monument à Sir John Macdonald a constitué la cible de plusieurs épisodes de vandalisme. Le dernier est survenu il y a 2 mois à peine, le 17 mars, lorsque le monument a subi une nouvelle attaque à la peinture aérosol rouge. Le rôle de l'empathie et de la solidarité dans les processus de résection de la mémoire ressort clairement dans les déclarations effectuées par les groupes revendiquant cette énième attaque, soit McDonald Must Fall. Dans un communiqué de presse envoyé aux différents médias et diffusé en entièreté par No Border Media, réseau des médias autonomes de gauche, sur leur page Facebook, les groupes McDonald Must Fall expliquent avoir vandalisé les monuments en solidarité et en soutien aux actions et mobilisations mondiales contre le racisme et le fascisme à l'aube de la Journée internationale contre le racisme, et demander que toutes les statues de McDonald soient retirées des espaces publics canadiens. Il me reste combien?
Il faudrait conclure.
OK, il faudrait conclure déjà. Donc, je vais vous montrer seulement justement les statues de la reine Victoria. Elle était aussi vandalisée. Puis justement, dans un communiqué aussi partagé sur Facebook, on pouvait lire que justement, c'était vraiment un autre acte. Ça faisait partie d'un mouvement international qui cible des monuments par des actes anticoloniaux et antiracistes. Donc, il mentionne tous les monuments qu'on vient de voir ou qu'on vient d'évoquer. Donc, pour dire que c'est aussi que la réaction est une simple expression de la solidarité anticoloniale et anti-impérialiste. Donc, évidemment, lorsqu'on s'intéresse à la mémoire, à la transmission de la mémoire et via les médias socio-numériques, et il faut quand même, il ne faut pas oblitérer les contextes sociopolitiques de sa résection. Donc, cette remise en question en cours au Canada est aussi, de son passé colonial, est aussi tributaire de ses particularités et des dynamiques internes. Et les nouveaux médias, en fait, ce qu'ils font, ils s'asservent la portée, ils accélèrent et rendent encore plus visibles ces dynamiques. Par exemple, elle est quand même symptomatique. Malgré les nombres d'actions et de pétitions par rapport à les statuts des Cornwallis, il est même quand même symptomatique que son retrait effectif soit survenu dans les sillons des violents affrontements à Charlottesville, amplement relayés par tous les médias et prenant particulièrement d'assaut les médias socio-numériques. Donc, c'est ça. Je vais m'arrêter là. Merci.
Merci, Analays. Donc, notre prochaine présentation va être en anglais, donc je vais lire le titre et la bio dans la langue de la présentation. Donc, c'est intitulé « Public Art in the Age of Digital Activism, The Case of Queer Memorialisation » by Martin Zebracki from University of Leeds. Dr. Zebracki is an associate professor of critical human geography at Leeds University. He has worked on the links between geography and public art practice, queer citizenship, digital culture, and processes of social inclusion and exclusion. He edited several books, such as Public Art Encounters, Art, Space, and Identity, and the Everyday Practice of Public Art, Art, Space, and Social Inclusion. He's preparing at this moment a book about the digital mediation of public art, of public art. And Zebracki is also a member of the editorial board of the scientific journal Public Art Dialogue. So welcome, Martin.
Thank you very much.
So you can put your presentation on the computer.
Bon après-midi. Tout d'abord, je voudrais exprimer ma gratitude aux organisateurs de la conférence pour avoir convoqué des chercheurs et des praticiens de toutes disciplines sur le thème de l'art public et de leur place dans la culture numérique contemporaine. And here my French ends. I acknowledge my privilege to be part of this timely and important event as much as I acknowledge my positionality as a cis white male queer scholar to address a novel niche of the queerness of public art that is inflected by anormative sexuality as well as digital mediation. How do public art objects operate as queer, especially in their afterlife? And by that I mean when such memorials are no longer in material existence and travel through digital space as they are mediated by the use of digital and online technologies. I present a case study on the afterlife of tęcza, which means Polish for rainbow. Tęcza was an ark covered by artificial flowers in a rainbow color scheme that its artist, Julita Wojciech, self-reportedly associated with the connection. Self-reportedly argued that it's associated with the connection between God and the people and colorful, cheerful associations of the rainbow. It was first installed in front of the EU Parliament in 2011 to honor Poland's rotating EU presidency. It was then relocated on a roundabout adjacent to a church in Warsaw's central Saviour Square in June 2012. The rainbow was, interestingly, commissioned by the government-sponsored organization, the Adam Mickiewicz Institute, which is funded by Poland's Ministry of Culture and National Heritage, which follows this interpretation of the connection between God and the people in this work. Entering the Polish everyday life, this work soon met with very far-right, ethno-nationalist and religiously conservative opposition due to so-called LGBT associations that were attributed to this structure. As I will argue, tęcza, Polish for rainbow, developed into a queer memorial due to ongoing antagonized engagements with this work, both in an offline and online interplay. It was repeatedly damaged through arson by the anti-LGBT sympathizers who blamed it for homosexual propaganda, especially around the annual National Independence Day on 11 November. And the structure was eventually burned down by an unknown man early December 2014. Tęcza was soon restored after this 18th incident, and due to peaceless radical opposition, the structure that previously held the flowers was permanently dismantled and removed from the site by the local authorities in August 2015, so 3 years after its installation. and is still today kept in the depot of the Center for Contemporary Art, who holds the rights over this work. Importantly to mention is that Tengsha was neither commissioned as a formal memorial or monument, depending on perspective, nor was it conceived of as a liberal symbol of LGBT culture or pride in the artist's inception. However, Tengsha has been strongly appropriated as a memorial to LGBT culture, or rather antagonizing counter-monument to the state. I assemble my presentation around two acts. The first one is on context and methods that I used, followed by vignettes, two vignettes which provide some preliminary insights. This case study on Tengsha is part of the larger British Arts and Humanities Research Council funded project Queer Memorials, International Comparative Perspectives on Sexual Diversity and Social Inclusivity, which is led by myself and the co-investigator, Professor Robert van der Beck, also based at the University of Leeds. The project aims to research social engagement with queer memorials in three contrasting contexts. There is the Homo Monument in Amsterdam, unveiled in 1987. The Gay Liberation Monument, erected on its final location in Christopher Park in New York City in 1992. And there is Tengsha, the case in hand. The Homo Monument, one of the project case studies indeed, has a perceived gay male bias, also in the name, Homo Monument, although this work is widely celebrated in LGBT culture and cosmopolitan lifestyles. The Gay Liberation Monument has received substantial opposition, considering the monument's apparent whiteness, resonating with wider national anti-racism protests such as Black Lives Matter. Nevertheless, the artist is known for making white castings. And yesterday, there's some new news for New York. It was announced that a transgender memorial will be erected near the same place, to Stonewall Inn, crediting the struggle of transgender activists in the 1969 Stonewall riots, exactly almost 50 years ago. This research is crucial at a moment when debates are intensifying about how to commemorate the lives of LGBT people, LGBT history, to memorialize victims of anti-LGBT violence and promote social inclusivity. It specifically engages with how queer memorials' key characteristics, location, material design, theme, symbolism, operate as sources of contestation. The postdoctoral research fellow Dr. Cortesina Virginka and myself were involved in the largely interview-based data collection for this case study, which is currently being analyzed by our research assistants Megan Wall and myself. So today will be preliminary insights. Each project case study involved a mixed methods approach, combining textual analysis of policy and media documents, extensive observational research and interviews, and focus groups. And the key actors were sampled through local authorities and LGBT organizations, and questions about aspects of the memorial's commissioning and management and their roles in social events. Publics, being both residents and visitors with varying degrees of attachments to the memorials, were approached on the street via local LGBT organizations and by self-selection. For Tengsha, the qualitative sample size of respondents comprised a diversity of 27 key actors and 70 members of the publics. 4 participants have been directly involved in Tengsha in a very professional capacity, meaning that they were involved in the installment and the work towards it. 12 participants were activists and politicians. 1 focus group was administered with 3 members of the public, and 4 artists were interviewed who worked specifically about or in response to Teng Shui, including a movie maker. 4 critical journalists have also been interviewed. And these categories that I just mentioned can be quite arbitrary, as a lot of respondents, they navigated multiple positionalities. And there must also be stressed that the basic tenet of the study was reflexivity, to show how viewpoints related to each other within the research community. So the insights that I will be presenting by no any means want to provide any statistical or representative insights. The case study, as well as a larger multi-site research project, adopted a broad approach in terms of its focus on the key dimensions of historical context, cultural politics, and everyday engagement. And this presentation centers on how a public artwork operated as a digitally mediated conversation piece, mainly drawing from the set of interviews and secondary material from public discourse. And it especially probes into the digital geographies of the bottom-up, unsanctioned co-creation of public art through online media, which can be rendered as both research sites and research tools. I pursue the argument here, in line with my previous work, that the myriad of possibilities of digital technologies for producing and exchanging user-created content beyond the intentions of artists and commissioners and the physical dimensions of public space have fundamentally queried the material ontology and social uses of public art. As Claire Bishop described, there is a, quote, troubling oscillation between intimacy and distance that characterizes our new technological regime, unquote. And remarkably, we see how artworks are inscribed into online discourse and the digital sphere, and how the latter may be turned into sites of public art production or as a public artwork as such. Digitally mediated public art can become an activist method proliferated by the digital to question or to query, to use the verbal variant of queer, the normality and thinking through it in an antipodal way. We have particularly seen coming such public artivism coming in fashion ever since the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008 to describe artistically informed and new avant-gardistic responses that are anti-normative, anti-globalist, anti-capitalist, anti-heteropatriarchal, and so forth. Indeed, on the basis of the following 2 vignettes, I will argue that the rainbow, in its inception, was not queer, but was made as such in its radical responses and politicizing afterlives. And for further context, queer, as initially employed as a rather derogative term, has become appropriated over time as an empowering state of mind to query or to challenge norms about sexuality or gender, but also in this case about the conventions of public art practice and engagement. As a result, those who describe themselves as queer often adhere to a more fluid understanding or affiliation regarding sexual orientation or gender identity. So put differently, queer is not a fixed identity, or for some even not an identity at all. In its very essence, queer challenges identity, as well as forms of oppression, marginalization, of sexually and socially variant communities in its broader activist aim to promote intersectional solidarity beyond only emphasizing sexual identity alone, which also involves social markers such as class, ethnicity, age, disability, religion, and geographical origin. So I employ the term LGBT, referring to lesbians, gay, bisexuals, and transgenders, to refer to identity politics, whilst queer, as an activist methodology, rather politicizes identity and questions its ascribed stabilities. Vignette 1. In Rainbow over Poland, what is the idea and place of queer seen through an ephemeral rainbow-shaped artwork under, if we speak for LGBT rights, the present-day dark sky of Poland? How can a digitally mediated public artwork memorialize deviating sexualities that have to date still remained invisible, ephemeral, or placeless? The highly conservative post-socialist context of Poland faces generally high levels of homophobia and transphobia, although the situation is relatively more favorable in the country's capital of Warsaw, where the Tańsza sculpture was based, and other major cities. Particularly since Poland's accession to the EU 2004, notable LGBT groups, including Lambda Warsaw, which is one of the project partners, but also interviewees, are from Lambda Warsaw, and the Equality Foundation as well have increasingly made efforts to put LGBT rights on local and national political agendas. However, in Warsaw, contrary to the Amsterdam and New York cases, same-sex unions are still not legally recognized in Poland, and LGBTs, they largely remain disadvantaged, as argued in my case study. Especially considering the current right-wing nationalist Polish government that further undermines LGBT rights, governed by the Law and Justice Party, as the headline of a recent widely online circulated op-ed in the New York Times read, "Poland's populists pick a new top enemy, gay people." Jarosław Kaczyński, the leader of Law and Justice, recently said, "We need to fight this. We need to defend the Polish family. We need to defend it furiously because it's a threat to civilization, not just for Poland, but for the entire Europe, for the entire civilization that is based on Christianity." On top of that, Marek Dziwiczki, a well-known Catholic priest and educator, added immediately, followed by outrage of the Twitterverse, quote, "It comes down to then waving a rainbow flag and trying to steal our internal values like truth, love, human life, family based on marriage, and morality based on gospel and decalogue," unquote. Let's come out of materiality. The rainbow as appropriated LGBT symbol has concurrently become part of the much criticized rainbow capitalism and homonationalism that implicates inclusion of the so-called tolerated other in a still dominant heteronormative society. So the rainbow might well be no longer the memorial preferred visual identity of the queer liberalist community. It has been assumed in a radical way and on their own terms as, again, a critical conversation piece, as a politics of visibility to potentially trigger a politics of recognition. As one of the interviewed activists argued, quote, "One time we had people in striped uniforms with a pink triangle taking part in the equality parade, which memorialized homosexuals murdered by Nazis." And this responded also in part, it's quote, "I come here every now, even now. They opened an ice cream parlor called At the End of the Rainbow. The name seems to be symbolic. I think they named it that way on purpose. Not to mention the Pride events, co-organized recently by Ben and Jerry's." To some extent, the digital has taken Tańsza out of its material absence, as much as it has taken LGBT people out of their social margins in social online safe spaces. And when it was there, respondents widely acknowledged how it functioned as a tourist stop and photo opportunity for visiting from other cities in Poland. However, not only the cultural context and social surveillance, but also the site affordances made it difficult to, for example, take selfies or kissing in front of it. Namely, the work was placed on a roundabout and it was illegal to cross. It was also bestowed with a digital life beyond personal moment and use. And more precisely, it was not entirely a story here of sharing love through the digital ether. As a justice and human rights activist commented, quote, "I saw it when I was okay, and I saw it while it was being put on fire. It was horrible. It was like even whole families were taking pictures with it, being burnt with pride and the next generations of hate." Teng Shui revealed a very complex tug-of-war over oppositional identity politics. An interview narratives indicated how the destruction of the rainbow particularly amplified the queerness of the work. With reference to the National Broadcasting Council, who reported about this incident, an academic that we interviewed said, "God, this arson was clearly recognized as a valuable act," unquote. The respondent alluded to how the arson was presented as the narrative of devastation in the public space, with homophobia not even being named as such, although this was precisely seen as the moment that its meaning as a symbol of LGBT came into being. Indeed, an interviewed movie director who's producing a movie about Teng Shui currently discussed the online blog queer.bl, where an influential member of the LGBT community who uses the pseudonym Her Perfectness wrote that until the moment of destruction of the rainbow, quote, the LGBT community had no any emotional attitude to this work. And now that it had been destroyed, it was their rainbow and they would defend it. Before that, not everyone in the liberal and left-wing circles liked it, but it became the LGBT symbol only when it had been destroyed. And similar to war memorial ceremonies, images were all over the place online of how people put real flowers to the base of the structure after the artificial flower bed was entirely burnt. Although the digital circulation of Teng Shui has lent a post-material afterlife to this work after its destruction, it has simultaneously subjected LGBT people to Poland's conservative and far-right limelight. Teng Shui clearly exercised the imagination over social media beyond its original site. As an activist and one of the Landauer founders conveyed, quote, the rainbow was such a litmus test. Because it was burned like 3 times or so, a lot of memes appeared in connection with his work. Later, the police got interested in it, and the people started taking pictures under the rainbow. I'm sure you can find tons of these on the internet. I think that even the New York Times or Guardian wrote something about it. And the repeated incidents also reached Poles over social media who were residing or traveling abroad at the time. Quote, I've seen a lot of videos of it burning, that's for sure. I've seen a lot of it. I think the first time it burned, I was abroad. I think I might have been in France or somewhere else. I see things, I read articles, unquote. Some respondents alluded to problems around whose views are represented on social media and on whose views are not, such as this local quote. I don't read the comments because they're just these comments from a random people. It could be a 15-year-old kid from far away in the north who has no clue about what's happening here or what's happening on Earth. Or there might be some old lady who's stuck in her apartment somewhere 5 kilometers away and she has no idea what's happening on Earth as well. So that's pointless to read, and there's like always thousands of it. So reading comments just makes me even more angry because they're just mostly really stupid, unquote. The commissioner, which was the Adam Mickiewicz Institute, used imageries of the rainbow in their online representation. And an employer of Adam Mickiewicz Institute, whom we interviewed, said, and who was also responsible for the Teng Shui installation, said, quote, when you see the photo, you'll see that we are proud of it. The Institute created a staged photo opportunity, we found out, just before Teng Shui was formally dismantled in 2015, which let the previously quoted movie director nevertheless think of some reputational damage control. Quote, there was a big goodbye party organized by the Adam Mickiewicz Institute, which had the rights to the rainbow now. It was handed over to the Center for Contemporary Arts. But before that, the Institute had the rights and they organized this event. There was a stage with a tent, a professional camera, and lighting. People stood on the stage and they could take a picture only by pressing a button, and there was a big queue to do it. And probably a few thousand photos were taken that day. They are available somewhere, possibly on the Institute's Facebook page or on the fan page, which was created for this event. There was social media control, and it was not new. The same employer told us that they monitored and moderated reactions on social media, although there was no fast reaction immediately after the installation. But that changed. Quote, when the flowers were prepared, the Teng Shui stood there And of course, all the traffic stopped. And there was also, of course, the hate comments. We needed to know those comments of others. We needed to check who was writing something on Facebook. So the Institute nevertheless switched off the ability to comment on their Facebook page for the article on Teng Shui. Nevertheless, breathing will out, the respondent said, quote, "It happened that people just commented about Teng Shui on other articles," unquote. In this place, I find it quite peculiar and maybe a bit naive how this institute adhered to the artist's original non-antagonized interpretation of the rainbow as the connection between God and the people and so on, as if they have been sitting on the fence. Last Equality Parade in Warsaw, June 2018, was Ben & Jerry's who was co-responsible for allowing an indestructible comeback of Teng Shui as hologram, which was widely circulated over social media. And this made an evident statement that the afterlife of this work is indeed alive and is co-created by discourse and creative practice in an effort to reclaim space. Without neoliberal enterprises and social media factories, so-called, would there be any landmark event that would lend visibility to the sexual other, I ask. Teng Shui still travels on. It has continued to set the tone for both LGBT rights and far-right anti-LGBT rights activism over social media beyond the local. And for example, in Suprazel, northeastern Poland, a concrete sculpture was painted in a rainbow color scheme by anonymous activists who obviously disclosed reference to the Teng Shui sculpture. One of the activists argued later on, when it got burned down, people kind of grew to polarize it even more, which is something that I can see in the Polish society in general, or recently, the huge polarization of opinions between conservatives and liberal right-wing and left-wing people. So this was kind of, it's very interesting to see it in such a small art piece on that kind of level. And as activists continued, quote, "It was mostly like people saying that Teng Shui should be here to show that Warsaw and Poland in general is becoming more tolerant, whereas the other side is discussing it as just another promotion of gender ideology." And it's important to note here, and I'm reaching to my conclusion, that the path of progressivism can be very normative and a highly contradictory process. Very monolithic imaginations of a progressive West versus a backward East do not do justice to the situation here. Here and there, one socially marginalized population may be visibilized and empowered over the other. The Teng Shui case has segued into my afterword about the afterlife of Teng Shui. How can normative territories be digitally stretched or overlayered as queer? In what ways do or do they not question or query hegemonic structures and norms that are othering sexual and social variants? Teng Shui has been sometimes silenced and sometimes voiced, depending on political disposition. Linking to Derridian spectrology and Foucauldian heterotopia, I say, Teng Shui acts as a ghostly conversation piece. It has found an ambiguous queer place in the collective memory that is embedded in a strongly conservative real world, a real world that is nevertheless networked and renegotiated through progressive virtual bubbles that have enabled to take the sexual other out of its closeted space. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you, Martin. Our last notre dernière présentation aujourd'hui est par Julia Skelly et s'intitule From Paper to Beach to Web, Lubaina, Himid, Jelly Mould Pavilion. Dr. Kelly teaches in the Department of Art History and Communication Studies at McGill University. Her areas of specialization include the visual culture of addiction, excess, global contemporary art, textiles, and feminist art history. She's the author of Wasted Looks, Addiction and British Visual Culture, and Radical Decadence, Excess in Contemporary Feminist Textiles and Craft. She's currently working on a book project entitled Skin Crafts, Affect, Violence, and Materiality in Global Contemporary Art.
you very much. You're welcome. Hi, my thanks to the organizers and the people who provided us with food. I guess it's maybe the same group. Thank you also to the previous two presenters. I also wanted to be a bit self-reflexive before I get into my paper, just to acknowledge, particularly given the topic of this conference, that I am, as a white settler scholar, a beneficiary of colonial violence, including, of course, the theft of land from Indigenous individuals. Okay, so African diasporic artist Lubaina Himid is concerned with the ways that national monuments in public spaces construct and concretize history. Himid, who was born in Zanzibar, which is an island off the the coast of East Africa, now lives and works in Preston in the northwest of the United Kingdom. And she's created a range of works dealing with the legacies of slavery and the official histories of the United Kingdom that erase the suffering as well as the triumphs of African individuals. This paper focuses on Himid's Jelly Mould Pavilion, which was originally a collaboration with the Liverpool Museum Service in 2010. The Liverpool project was an imagined competition amongst African architects to design a jelly mold pavilion that would commemorate the contributions of people of the African diaspora to Liverpool. So as an imagined competition, Himid was the only artist, the only person who painted these maquettes. She then displayed them around Liverpool, and I will discuss that in a moment. A full-scale version of the Jelly Mould Pavilion was built in 2017 for the Folkestone Triennial. The pavilion, which is now on permanent display, although I believe, to the best of my knowledge, it was initially intended to be temporary. So I'm really interested in this conversation that some of you have started about the difference between ephemerality as a kind of potentially destabilizing force and a permanent structure, which I would suggest has now been appropriated by Folkestone as a tourist attraction. So it's been appropriated by a capitalist system, whereas the intention originally was very much to be a critical temporary work, mourning or memorializing slaves, but also acknowledging the complicity of Folkestone and Britain in the slave trade, which I will flesh out in a moment. So the pavilion, which is now on permanent display, is situated on the beach in the port town of Folkestone, which, like Liverpool, played a particular role in the transatlantic slave trade. The site, then, is a crucial part of the Jelly Mould Pavilion's political objectives. In what follows, I will discuss the shifting significations of the Jelly Mould Pavilion. So I'm arguing, certainly, that the jelly mold as an object, both in the Liverpool iteration and as a pavilion, the jelly mold is an empty signifier, or if you prefer, a slippery signifier that is filled with different meanings based on the viewer's experiences and lived subject position. Okay, so I'm interested in the kind of different ways the Jelly Mould Pavilion signified in Liverpool as opposed to in Folkestone. Let's see. So again, in the Liverpool iteration, as you see here with the project, Himid painted these ceramic Victorian jelly molds. And in Folkestone, the building was constructed actually by a group of individuals working at a sculpture studio in Essex. And then Himid painted the exterior of the top part in her studio in Preston. So the Jelly Mould Pavilion transitioned from an imagined competition to an in situ work of public art. And I will show, because it's not really an argument, it's very obvious, that online comments about Folkestone's Jelly Mould Pavilion demonstrate a troubling combination of sexism and willful amnesia in relation to Britain's complicity in the slave trade. So, I'm thinking now about Himid's spatial politics, drawing on Rosalind Deutsch's book Evictions, Art and Spatial Politics of 1996. In that book, Deutsch remarks that, quote, exclusions are justified, naturalized, and hidden by representing social space as a substantial unity that must be protected from conflict, heterogeneity, and particularity. Evictions, that's the title of her book, takes account of specific exclusions in urban aesthetic discourses to expose the authoritarian strategies that construct unitary images of social space. In the end, I contend that conflict, far from the ruin of democratic public space, is the condition of its existence, end quote. Building on Deutsch's arguments, I want to suggest that in turn, that in working with official institutions in Liverpool and Folkestone, museums in Liverpool and the Folkestone Triennial in Folkestone, Himid had to negotiate her desire to illuminate the exclusions related to slavery and Black individuals in the official histories of Britain, while making her project palatable to a range of publics, some of which are still resistant to seeing the hidden histories that Himid is attempting to excavate. I argue that while in Liverpool, the Liverpool iteration of the Jelly Mould Pavilion project, I'm going to just start that again. I argue that while the Liverpool iteration of the Jelly Mould Pavilion project intervenes in a range of spaces and demands mobility and thoughtful, and I would add affective engagement from her audiences, the Folkestone Pavilion lacks the critical element of conflict that Deutsch calls for in her book. And I want to be very clear here. I'm arguing that this material object in situ in Folkestone lacks the conflict, but I'm going to be arguing and showing that in fact its digital afterlife illuminates that it did in fact create conflict. Let's see. The Liverpool Pavilion project was developed with expectations of addressing a much larger and broader audience. I'm quoting here Miwan Kwan in her book about site-specific art. She does not discuss the pavilion, obviously. That book was published in 2002. But like much site-specific art, if not all of site-specific art, Himid was developing this project with expectations of addressing a much larger and broader audience than, for example, would normally enter Liverpool's slavery museum. Not everyone, of course, is willing to go into a slavery museum. As I will show, Himid seems to have felt that she needed to play both sides with her Folkestone Pavilion, perhaps because of the site chosen, a former amusement park, but also in the context of the Folkestone Triennial, which is intended to, at least in part, bring tourists into the town. And I think this is really important to underscore that, again, the pavilion was intended as a temporary pavilion. But this triennial brought in the most tourists in its history. And so I think because of that decision, based on what I've been able to glean from the internet, because of the money they made, they decided to keep it as a permanent work of public art. So the Folkestone Pavilion is silent, and I would add static, in a way that the Liverpool Jelly Mould project was not. And I suggest, and this silence, I suggest, allows space for a continued willful blindness to the history of Britain's slave trade. A Twitter comment written on September 2nd, 2017 in response to an article entitled Lubaina Himid's Wonderful Jelly Mould Pavilion, a subtle meditation on the history of colonialism and sugar plantations, points toward a desire to read the pavilion as a site of love rather than mourning. The commentator wrote, quote, "It's beautiful. I get the message, but it also makes me think of a little wedding chapel. The world could do with a little love right now," end quote. And I think even more than signifying just love, a wedding chapel signifies class heteronormative rituals and the kind of exclusions, in fact, that Deutsch is talking about, rather than only signifying love, as this Twitter commentator suggests. So as Deutsch reminds us, Henry Lefebvre's phrase, "the production of space," signifies the fact that, quote, "the organization of the city and of space in general is neither natural nor uniformly advantageous. space is rather political, inseparable from the conflictual and uneven social relations that structure specific societies at specific historical moments, end quote. This was certainly true for Liverpool during the transatlantic slave trade. And one of the strengths of Himid's Jelly Mould Pavilion project in Liverpool is that it demanded a phenomenological engagement from spectators that would have been informed by their own intersectional subject positions, including gender, race, and ability, moving through the streets and spaces of Liverpool. To quote Deutsch once more, public art that is successfully radical must, quote, employ spatial tactics developed in postmodern art, site specificity, institutional critique, critiques of representation, to reveal the social relations that constitute both aesthetic and urban spaces. So I would add just very quickly here that there is an institutional critique underway with this project in the spaces that she chose and was able to negotiate with Liverpool museum systems services, pardon me. So the Studley House, for example, is a museum, historical house, and art gallery that was once owned in the 19th century by an owner of ships, right? So that hopefully speaks volumes about where that wealth was coming from in the 19th century. So according to Marcus Wood, who's written prolifically about the visual culture of slavery, quote, if the memory of slavery inhabits one location in Britain, it is Liverpool. By the early 19th century, the physical presence of the city itself was configured by Fuseli as a metropolis composed of blood and chains. Quote, this is Fuseli, the principal streets of the town may be said to have been marked out by the chains and the walls of the houses cemented by the blood of Africans, end quote. Wood also notes that it was because of Liverpool's domination of the British slave trade that the Liverpool Docklands were seen as the most fitting site for the second English slavery museum, the Transatlantic Slavery Gallery of the Museums and Galleries of Merseyside. The gallery opened in 1992. 18 years later, Himid collaborated with the Liverpool Museum Service to display a set of proposed jelly mold pavilions, pavilion maquettes, which again, Himid made from ceramic jelly molds, Victorian ceramic jelly molds that she had been collecting since 2007, placed on their sides and painted with patterns and what she calls portraits. So this is just to give you a sense of what ceramic jelly molds look like. I literally had no idea what a jelly mold was before I started working on this project. To give you a sense of scale, she laid them out on tables. The display ultimately on the city included 30 maquettes, and then she painted various molds with patterns, African patterns. She's really interested in African patterns and textiles as a secret language, particularly for women. And these are just two examples. I'm particularly interested in her representations of faces. I don't have time to get into that today. So the maquettes, which were ostensibly created by a range of African architects, were displayed throughout Liverpool, effectively creating a public art trail. In Liverpool, viewers of the Jelly Mold Pavilion became active participants, mobile and mobilized. And certainly it goes without saying that viewers' levels of knowledge and levels of political interest or concern would have varied widely. Viewers were invited to imagine which pavilion they might choose to celebrate the contributions made by people of the Black diaspora to the fabulously rich cacophony of vistas and the amazing wealth at the heart of Liverpool's history. That's a quotation. It's a bit flowery for my own writing style. The implicit message here, I would argue, is that this wealth was largely accumulated on the backs of African slaves. The project was not a prescribed tour of Liverpool, but rather more like a treasure hunt that encouraged spectators to move freely through the city. And I also want to argue, just very kind of as a almost just spitballing, that this free movement, this moving freely through the city, is in itself ironic in the context of slavery, of course. A long list of official sites in Liverpool were provided online as potential locations for a future pavilion. Okay, so she's very much interested in a kind of future-oriented project here, not just looking back, but looking into the future as well. Viewer participants had to be willing to walk around the city and actively look for the pavilions. A further layer of the project demanded that participants choose their favorite pavilion while imagining imagining a future Liverpool in which a full-scale pavilion monument would be built to commemorate the contributions of the African diaspora. The project was therefore created to attend to the often hidden contributions made to the history, culture, and rich fabric of Liverpool by people of the African diaspora. The subtext, however, was that the diaspora exists in Britain, at least in part because of Britain's role in the slave trade. With the embodied movement through Liverpool's memorial landscape, there was playful yet serious attention being paid to the past, present, and future of the Black diaspora in Britain. A full-scale version of the Jelly Mould Pavilion was commissioned for the Folkestone Triennial in 2017. This site is important, and Himid has noted as such, given Folkestone's status as a port town. Because of this, it played a role in the British slave trade. The fact that the pavilion was built on the beach, usually a site associated with leisure, at least for certain groups of people, also recalls Rosalind Deutsch's assertion that, quote, the organization of the city and of space in general is neither natural nor uniformly advantageous. Am I out of time?
No, it's just the mics.
Am I being too loud?
No, it's just they're like.
Okay.
Lequel?
I can't tell if I'm being too loud or too squeaky.
Lequel? Okay. We'll switch mics.
Is this one not working?
It's just
Because
like
the
going
batteries are.
I think that's just because I'm going like this.
No, it's
No? Okay.
No.
That
That's-
gesture doesn't
that's
need to
better.
happen anymore. Okay. So, as I was saying, the fact that the pavilion was built on the beach, of course, is significant. And Rosalind Deutsch asserts that, quote, the organization of the city and of space in general is neither natural nor uniformly advantageous, end quote. For some, the beach signifies leisure. For others, the beach was a site of enslavement, fear, and death. The pavilion, which Himid painted, as I mentioned, in her studio in Preston after it was constructed in Essex, and I'm going to come back to that, is located near the Folkestone Boardwalk and looks out over the former Rotunda site, which was until recently filled with amusement arcades and a roller coaster. And there's a lot of references in newspaper articles about cotton candy and sugar being consumed excessively at this amusement park. But indeed, the sugar, as we know, undergirds the very fabric of, or was crucial for the transatlantic slave trade, and sugar undergirds the very fabric of Folkestone's economy. And sugar, of course, was violently extracted from British colonies. And a really great book, if anyone is interested, is written by K. Diane Criz on sugar and slavery. In a 2-minute YouTube video about the pavilion, and I don't have a good photograph to give you a better sense of the exterior, and no one is telling me what the exterior signifies. So I would be deeply surprised if it was only aesthetic, right? The inside was actually painted by the sculpture studio. As you can see, it's turquoise with a diamond design, I guess. But nothing that I've read that quotes Himid tells us what the exterior signifies for her. So for me, what I see are, stylized coffee beans, which isn't particularly helpful, but I also see perhaps, and this is a bit of a stretch, the image of the slave bodies tightly fit together in images of boats on the Middle Passage. But again, the kind of lack of information we're given is one of the problems with this work, the kind of lack of information to read this work as political and as critical. In a 2-minute YouTube video about the pavilion, Himid states, quote, the pavilion has many layers. It's a place to contemplate, it's a place to shelter, but it's a place also that reminds you of other beaches where Africans were held before they were shipped. It's a place where refugees arrive, going from one place to another to Europe. But it's also a reminder for people in Folkestone of an old fairground that was here, and I suppose a kind of nostalgic look at childhood, too many sweets and just having a good time on the beach. This strikes me as an oversimplifying gloss of the work, and it is surprisingly off-brand for Himid, who's been extremely vocal about not only the suffering of slaves, but also the ongoing marginalization of Black female artists in Britain. It's as though she's trying to play both sides here, point to the difficult histories of Britain while also catering to those viewers, both locals and tourists, who might want to just have a nice day at the beach. Skye Sherwin wrote in her review of the Folkestone Triennial that was published in The Guardian, quote, Folkestone's dramatic landscape and modeled past make it a one-off, and the triennial will always be hardwired to its setting. Yet it's difficult not to yearn for the odd moment when the show might go off message with work that puts art before local context, confident that the audience will be game enough to follow. That's not to say this year doesn't have its share of unexpected delights. For example, Turner Prize nominee Lubaina Himid's Pavilion on the shingle in the shape of a vintage jelly mold. With its milkshake pink and white diamond decor, a lightly worn reference to sugar and the slave trade, its pleasures are bittersweet, end quote. You can counter that this is exactly the problem with Himid's Folkestone Pavilion. Its lightly worn reference to the slave trade can easily be shrugged off, and it does not challenge or unsettle its viewers. Its sickly sweet color scheme suggests a tentativeness that is unusual in Himid's work. We know, of course, that Himid won the Turner Prize in 2017. It was announced in December 2017, and the pavilion went up in September 2017. In the next section of the paper, the final section, I will demonstrate how the digital afterlife of Himid's pavilion, and one could argue the continued afterlife of the slaves who Himid is mourning, reveals the ongoing resistance to this mourning that some individuals still feel. The internet, as we know, is notoriously the domain of trolls. Reading only a few comments posted about Lubaina Himid's Jelly Mold Pavilion proves this to be the case. The fact that Himid is a Black woman who won the Turner Prize in 2017, soon after the Jelly Mold Pavilion was constructed in Folkestone, is inextricably linked with the apparently poisonous feelings that some commentators have had in response to the pavilion. I want to show how its digital afterlife has continued to do important critical work by inspiring at least a few trolls to reveal their true colors. That is, the pavilion in its digital form, even more than its material form, has rooted out some individuals' sexism, racism, and unwillingness to deal with Britain's unsavory history as a country that traded human beings. Without the internet's special little comment sections, we could not have the following empirical evidence of ongoing willed amnesia, bigotry, and loathing of political public art. In the comments section for a YouTube video that shows employees at Aidan Hines Sculpture Studios painstakingly building the Jelly Mold Pavilion in their studio in Essex, one commentator wrote, quote, ha ha, woman creates something amazing, men completely make and install structure, woman then takes complete recognition, MGTOW is freedom, exclamation mark. If you thought that comment was unsettling, Google informs me that MGTOW stands for Men Going Their Own Way, which appears to be a men's rights group. Another commentator wrote, quote, sorry guys, this isn't a sculpture, it's architecture. It has a function. It's functional like a spoon or toilet. No matter the beauty, how conceptual or socially significant, it's just not a piece of art. Its function here appears to be lecturing us and society on so-called historical injustice aimed primarily at your average white guy. Note the ones lecturing us only go so far back in history and context, then it stops. If they went further back, everyone would be indicted, not just European males, and we can't have that, can we? For history is made up of many winners and losers, and the guilt you are made to feel would be diluted amongst the many if truth be told. So that's hysterical nonsense, but there are obviously at least two things going on in this quotation. More than two, certainly. The first is the refusal to see Himid's pavilion as sculpture, that is, as public art, choosing rather to position it as architecture. But rather than identifying its function as shelter or seating, there are seats provided. The commentator identifies its function as lecturing on so-called historical injustice. The second related affective layer of this comment, of course, is the defensiveness and anger of the average white guy. I'm obviously assuming the commentator is a white guy. That's what I've done there. Faced with the difficult histories of Britain that have ongoing ripple effects in the present day. The reference to a toilet in this comment is not accidental and perhaps reveals the writer's aesthetic judgment of Himid's work, or perhaps just an overall judgment. And another commentator wrote, who exactly is supposed to get the Turner Prize for this? Lubaina Himid, or pardon me, he just calls her Lubaina. Lubaina should at least come to the studio and sweep up for you, end quote. The familiar use of the first name only for a woman artist is indicative here. and the suggestion of a Black African female artist being told that she should undertake unpaid labor is the darkest kind of irony. Finally, News Lover, in response to a short online article about Himid's Pavilion, wrote on December 18th, 2017, quoting an article, but in fact, this quotation is from the Turner Committee's, 1 second. Yeah, 1 minute. It's all I got. This is the Turner Committee saying Himid won the Turner Prize, that her work is uncompromising in tackling issues including colonial history and how racism persists today. And so this commentator, News Lover, quotes that and says, "Dear gods, what patronizing drivel. These lovies really need to get a life. This is a stupid upturned jelly mold." I think it's downturned, but it is pathetic and not exactly something that future generations will admire. It will rust away just like their other artistic endeavors and will be an eyesore. All those monstrosities which have been placed on public land as if they owned it all. Well, they don't own this town. Folkestone belongs to us all. End quote. The irony here, of course, is that this comment is very clearly creating an us versus them binary, even while suggesting that Folkestone belongs to us all. The question is, who does the us refer to? This comment supports Rosalind Deutsch's insight about just how problematic the word public is in the context of site-specific art, while also revealing an antipathy towards public art in general. As Deutsch notes, quote, "The singular public space is a phantom because its claim to be fully inclusive has always been an illusion." So in the digital afterlife of Himid's work, the Pavilion, as soft as I believe the Pavilion itself is, I believe, the work, and particularly the digital afterlife of the work, has done the important work of revealing how very vital Himid's feminist, anti-racist art remains. Thank you very much. Are we doing questions?
You can stay there. Thank you. Alors, s'il y a des questions pour nos conférenciers.
Merci beaucoup à vous trois. J'ai trouvé vraiment intéressant ce dialogue entre la sculpture publique, le monument public et la vie digitale de ces monuments. So I have a question for Julia. I was wondering about the word pavilion, which I'm not sure you talked about.
I didn't talk about it at all.
Because to me it reminds me of universal exhibitions.
Yeah.
And so there's like this kind of, again, this sort of, related to othering and all that. And I was wondering if you considered the word at all?
Honestly, I haven't thought about the word because I was just so focused on the jelly mold as an object. So I really wasn't thinking about the pavilion as a kind of structure. But I think it's just in terms of the expositions and the great exhibitions, in terms of, as you say, othering, and indeed the exhibition of individuals identified as other, as exotic, is not unimportant. And even just thinking about the great exhibition and oh god, what's that guy's name? Powers, Virginia Slave, something like that. So again, that history of exhibitions is super important for the Liverpool Museum's intervention and institutional critique. But what her work doesn't do explicitly, but we could link it with historically, is in fact the exhibition of bodies. For example, the Hottentot Venus, or natives, quote unquote. But yeah, so I think for me, I'm thinking about the ceramic objects because I'm writing a book about craft materiality, but I think I do need to think more about her choice of the pavilion as the specific form of architectural site that
It puts the viewer in a particular historical
Yeah.
position.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, that's the thing. The image that I showed before did show the people moving through. So there is an element of mobility here, but I don't see it as thank you so much, as critically successful as with the Liverpool work, because I think I didn't see it in person, and so that's a huge problem right there, but just the way that this can be so easily appropriated for non-political uses, and whereas the Liverpool work, I think, is really more grounded in critique and is more successful in terms of demanding something from the viewers.
Autre question? Je pense qu'il y avait une question en arrière d'abord.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. I have two questions. One is probably for all of you concerning the digital afterlife that creates debate and changes reception, which then changes the meaning of the work, so to speak, right? And that is something that, James Youngstad argues for counter monuments in general, that the debate is very important and attaches to the work. And so my simple question was, so what is different now that we're talking about social media as opposed to press, blah, 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 other forms of public debates around monuments? This is question one. Or maybe it's not different, also fine. And the second question, I think, is about the form, abstraction versus narrative qualities of these monuments. That's maybe more for Martin and Julia, because historically, the history of commemoration of trauma has been abstract, mostly first because people didn't know how to deal with it, then somehow minimalism became that successful kind of formal quality for Holocaust and whatnot, Maya Lin too, and so on and so forth. And so with the rainbow, there's something nicely abstract about the form that seems to open it up also to narratives, while this looks for me horribly convoluted with narratives. Maybe that's why it doesn't work. There's kind of too much going on. Okay. But the point about all these abstract trauma monuments is also they're not really anything unless you have a ritual or memorial plaque or someone who makes the history evident. So that's pretty normal. That it's not the monument. The monument is a metaphor, crystallization of something, usually not really telling you a story. And so why do we now want a narrative through the monument? It's always the public who has to kind of create something with it, I think. It's kind of a maybe not completely clear question, but it felt, maybe particularly in your talk, that it felt a bit unresolved in like, what do we want from a monument?
Well, I mean, just to be super basic, I think different people want different things, right? So
obviously,
like,
but I'm saying, but in your critique, right?
Right.
You're wanting something that the monument does.
I think your point is well taken. I'm not sure that I would use the word narrative, but I think also in terms of my argument that this is silent in a way that the Liverpool work isn't. So the Liverpool work had websites telling people where they could go. The maquettes were displayed with things on the walls, and I assume, but I would have to double check this, that there was information provided, textual information, right? Whereas with this one, based on what I've read, there was no information or context provided or narrative. And yet all the journalists knew, oh, this is about sugar. This is about sugar, and so that's what it's about, right? I don't know if you want to go for it, Martin, because I didn't really answer that, but I don't want to take up too much room.
And McGill, thank you for your queries and points. So if I understood correctly, you are asking how the digital mediation has changed the roles and uses of monuments as we have been knowing them. So that's a very interesting question and difficult to answer. It's very much dependent on the local geographies, etc. But what I find interesting in the digital mediation is how the level of co-creation that is done via online and digital technologies. So the proliferation of a work beyond the original location and the intent of the artist online, so that has really augmented all these opportunities for co-creating a monument. And then the form and the narrative, it's very interesting indeed to see how, in terms of that this monument not seen as a static thing, but something that wants something from the audience, that the audience is narrating the monument. So it's I prefer the gerund when I talk about monuments and more memorials. So the querying, the questioning, the memorialization, that's where it comes to its full nature of being a memory to a traumatic event whatsoever. And you were also asking about the what the digital has done to dealing with traumas. I think the digital has provided us with opportunities for instant satisfaction. So when something happens on that spot, you can tweet about it and it travels all around the world immediately, instantly. So I think there's one element there that has fundamentally changed the swiftness, but also the velocity of response. It also reminds me of your point about this when you were talking about the plaque and how the monument is told by engagers about ekphrasis, so how the publicness is inscribed in this whole discourse and this engagement. So that was an interesting point for me to think about this notion of ekphrasis. Yes?
I just wanted to expand on the question, but also what you said about how the digital mediation had changed the uses of monuments. And I was thinking about my own communication today. I was talking about the creation of new community of memories around contested monuments, but those communities can also be created around monuments that we can embrace certain, maybe not monuments, more memorials. So, because it talked to us somehow, some way. So I was putting an example, talking about a case study about monuments that's been rejected, but the digital mediation also potentially can create communities that gather around certain memorials or artworks in space, and not only in relation to rejection, but also in relation to embracing something that is common, something that we can share eventually.
I had thought you had actually answered the question. My bad, that's my bad French. Or you actually talking about, so thank you. Thanks for re-explaining it in English.
On a le temps pour une dernière question rapide. Je pense qu'il y en avait une ici. Oui.
Thank you all for your presentations. I was just wondering if any of you could perhaps expand or consider Lefebvre beyond what Julia pointed out, but Lefebvre talks about space is socially constructed, and in turn that space informs the public or the spectators of the space. And it does the digital communities or the digital fora sort of constitute that new space, that's sort of an addenda to the actual space that you're talking about, and how can we reconcile that?
That's a very interesting question. It also resonates with wider social theories around the right to space, I think, and in that discussion it's interesting to see how the digital is used to reclaim space, or to provide alternative readings of that space. So that's quite interesting in the case of Feng Shui, how that work that is no longer there is getting reincarnated by all these co-creations online, not only produced in Poland, but also beyond. So there's something very interesting in terms of the overlayering and the right to space. And
will try and answer. Well, in fact, your question, thank you for your question, made me think of what just Martin said about, in relation with the previous question, how the digital mediation have changed the uses of monuments and how it depended on local geographies, in fact. And it came to my mind the fact that not everyone, can claim the virtual space equally. If we think of the country where I was born, Cuba, today less than 10% of the population can access to that virtual space that represent the internet and that connection. So these are questions that they have to be, locally answered. And they would like, in Cuba to claim that virtual space, they're looking for opportunities and they're trying to do it in their own way and with their own resources. But I'm just saying that this has to be locally analyzed and figured out as well.
Just super quickly, the thing that comes to mind right off the bat is that the internet digital space is one of those spaces that does not necessarily, but can bring out the worst in people. So I see that in the comments that I read. I think Martin's artist referenced that when he was saying, I don't read the comments because they're stupid. And so there's a way that certain spaces, like humans produce space, but certain space informs humans, and they bring out the best in people and they can bring out the worst. And I think the anonymity of the internet can often bring out the worst. And so that's really important for my case study. But I think the kind of lack of panopticon of the internet, I don't know, that probably doesn't work, but there is a way that those spaces, the digital spaces, do absolutely inform those communities, right? It's a space of multiple publics that are intersecting but also oppositional. And so that kind of space is informing how people write, the kind of words they choose. And I think it certainly allows some people to say the things they wouldn't necessarily say in other public spaces or spaces that are public.
Thank you, merci. Je crois que c'est temps pour la pause, à moins qu'il y ait une question brûlante dans la salle, mais on ne dirait pas. OK. Alors, merci aux panélistes.
Le café, le thé et le reste qui ont their full coffee and tea are back there. J'aime